Runaway, the sixth installment of Curriculum of Grace, a series of articles chronicling God's pursuit of a young man impervious to the teaching of elders. The agitation that plagued me senior year got worse, not better, after the psychologist gave me a clean bill of mental health. One day I was so distracted I could barely eat lunch. It was a Wednesday. At Groton, a Christian boarding school, that meant no late afternoon study hall. Boys were allowed to walk into the village, where the local lunch counter offered milkshakes and a store sold sundries the school didn't provide. It was a Wednesday. At Groton, a Christian boarding school, that meant no late afternoon study hall. Boys were allowed to walk into the village, where the local lunch counter offered milkshakes and a store sold sundries the school didn't provide. I put on galoshes and trudged out to the school gates. It was a sunny day. A January thaw was in progress. Brilliant white piles of snow were melting at the sides of the road. I'd planned to walk north toward the village, but instead I turned south, thinking I would walk for a while with the sun in my face, then retrace my steps and stop for a milkshake. It was one of those moments when you decide something on impulse, and you could search long and hard without knowing for sure where the impulse came from. Did God steer you? Was it purely by chance you took one path, not another? Was it an expression of some unconscious need? The road was empty. The warmth of the sun and the rhythmic click of unfastened buckles were strangely soothing in the silent countryside. It was a relief to be free of the dining hall hubbub. As I passed the masters' houses, the tension I'd been feeling subsided. The residential cluster around school gave way to farmland. I thought I would continue just a bit longer. Boys weren't supposed to be walking this way. To the village and back was the prescribed limit of our free afternoons, but who would see me if I just kept on walking? The further I got from the school, the more peaceful the glistening tarmac and the white piles of melting snow. Another half hour passed. The sun inched lower in the sky. I began to feel hungry. I hadn't eaten much lunch. After a long stretch of open farmland, I passed a house and then another. Time to turn back? The village was nearly 2 miles past the school gates in the opposite direction. Would the lunch counter still be open? It would be a shame to walk all that way and find nothing to put in my stomach. I kept walking, a second impulsive decision. 2 made a pattern. A cluster of smaller houses appeared, then a side street. I'd reached the outskirts of Ayr, a town we drove through when my mother brought me out at the start of the school year. There were stores here and a couple of restaurants. Something would be open. No need to walk all the way back on an empty stomach. The diner in town was nearly empty. I ordered a hamburger and soda. The waitress, I noted, didn't seem at all curious. Grotties never ventured this way. People here were probably barely aware of the school. I paid for the burger and strolled through the small business district. It was colder now. The sun was low in the sky. If I wanted to head back to school, I'd better go now. A group of young men huddled in front of a store, some with pea-green duffel bags. Soldiers on leave, I guessed. There was a base not far from here. A lighted sign in the store window said Greyhound. I hadn't realized the bus to the city stopped here. The thought of my parents' home in the Boston suburbs sprang unbidden into my mind. If I caught the bus in a trolley, I could be home for dinner. I thought of the school, dorm, dining hall, and that nagging dyspepsia I couldn't shake free of. The warmth of home called to me. I went into the small store and bought a bus ticket. The door of my parents' house swung open as I was turning the knob, and my mother and father looked out in astonishment. Someone else was expected for dinner, Estelle, my aunt, and garrulous Howard, her husband. They'd be delighted to see me, but did the school know I was here? Had I been given permission? I stammered out my admission of truancy. My father arched his eyebrows, then headed upstairs to call the school. My mother asked anxiously if I was all right. I tried to explain the agitation that plagued me, but didn't get far before Estelle and Howard arrived. I ate in silence under Aunt Estelle's inquisitive eyes, for once grateful for Howard's garrulity. After they left, I tried again to describe the mysterious agitation, the source of which no one could tell me. My father opined that senior year can be a time of restlessness and impatience. The great thing was not to give in, to keep your eye on the ball, to continue to work toward your goals. He was trying to be helpful. He even volunteered to drive me back to school, despite having to work in the morning. We found the headmaster waiting for us in his study. My father apologized for disturbing him. He sat down beside me, nodding gravely all through the recitation of rules about leaving campus. My punishment was unexpectedly mild, a month of confinement to the campus and an earlier bedtime. At the door of the headmaster's residence, my father and I shook hands, and he drove off into the night, clearly relieved that the crisis had passed, blissfully unaware that it had been merely postponed. I walked slowly back to the dorm, got undressed, and slept like a baby. In the days that followed, the mysterious agitation vanished. I applied myself with renewed energy and forgot for the time being whatever it was that had gone wrong in my life. But that didn't mean the lessons of running away hadn't sunk in. The agitation had ceased almost as soon as I set out on my walk and left school behind. That meant it was somehow connected to the person Groton had made me. Neither the school nor my mother or father could help, which meant that what ailed me lay outside their experience and beyond the scope of their knowledge. These things I saw, but they didn't register. The curriculum of grace, of which these episodes are a part, was an undercurrent of life in my late teens, nudging, steering, and pulling me in ways that I would struggle all my life to understand. The apparently wanton impulse that led me to turn south instead of north out of the school gates, to keep walking when I knew I should have turned back, and to buy a bus ticket to a place I was forbidden to go, were not wanton. They only appeared so because I did not know their source. I could not know that until I acknowledged my Heavenly Father and recognized the futility of the prideful life my earthly father and the school he sent me to were preparing me for.